I'm just sending you a note to welcome you to the class and go over what I want you to do for this next week. I'll see how this kind of video communication works. I thought it might be nicer than an email, clearer. Uh, but if people have problems with it for whatever reason, I can always switch back to just doing basic emails. The syllabus itself, I think, is pretty self explanatory. If you have any questions, you can bring those up either through email or at the first class meeting. Um, as far as what my expectations are and what I want you to do for this first week or really half week, um, there are really five things I want you to do. Two articles to read, some social studies materials to look at. I want you to look at the standards and come up with, based on those standards and how people conceive of what social studies are all about, um, really what is the main point, or what is a main point that you would want your students to take away if you taught this material for about a week. So I'm going to go through each one of these things just to clarify. First thing is that I want you to read these two articles. Alfie Kohn says that standardization is bad across the board, and Hirsch says that we need some kind of common core curriculum if we want our democracy to survive. Now, the reason I want you to read these things is because standards come and go, standards change. Right now, we do have a Common Core curriculum, but the Republican majority in the legislature wants to change that and has labeled that as a priority. At least that was in their agenda from this past year. Last year, we had a state test, the Badger exam, that was aligned with the Common Core. And now, basically, the new testing company is bringing back the old WKCE. All this is costing taxpayers probably about $100 million, if not $150 million, when all is said and done. Basically, to make a change and go back to what we were doing. A lot of people have to re-examine their curriculums, change their lessons, and so on, and it seems like a big ruckus when nothing is really changing. Um, that being said, are standards any good at all? If we can just swap out one set for another, why do we even have them in the first place? Well, one of the things that are great about standards is that unless you've been teaching social studies for a long time, you probably don't have a good idea of what social studies are all about. Now, if you look at our grade 4 standards, and you can find them on the DPI website, I have a copy of them here. You have the other grades on the DPI website as well. People conceive of social studies, at least in Wisconsin, as having these five major areas. One, geography. How do we live in the land? What is the land like? What does it mean to live well there? History. What have people done in the past? What were the successes? What were the failures? And so on through all these different eras. When we look at citizenship and political science, what does it mean to live in a community as part of a society? What are your responsibilities? How does government function and things like that? Important stuff to know. The fourth one is economics, basically how money makes everything go around. And we really need a system of fair exchange. So if I have something of value, I can give it to somebody else and get something of value that I don't have. I mean, imagine if we didn't have any kind of standardized units of money. That would make things incredibly difficult to operate. Um, you may not think of it as fair now, but it's pretty good considering what other alternatives are. The fifth one is behavioral science. Basically, why do people do what they do? When you think of history and you think that not too long ago it was okay that women didn't vote, it was okay that people had other people as slaves or property. Um, it was okay that all kinds of social inequities were around, and somehow people are okay with that. When we consider this social studies material that I want you to look at, which is really just a unit on Spanish colonization of the Americas, from Columbus all the way through, full-blown colonies, um, and the rise of Spanish as Spain as a major world power. Why was it okay for Columbus to go out and, basically establish a not new civilization, new extension of Europe in a land that was already occupied, and he killed a lot of people along the way. Why was it okay for Cortez and Pizarro and the conquistadors to go in and basically kill everyone and take all the gold? And why was it okay for them to enslave the native people and create a completely stratified society based on your links to the homeland of Spain? All these things were okay. Why were people okay doing that, right? Why was Columbus willing to risk everything and sail the ocean blue? Why were people doing what they were doing? When we think of social studies, then we're thinking of really what does it mean to live in society, right? What does it mean to be a human? How can we do it well? What's going to lead to the greatest successes? Now, when we go back to these two articles, then the question is okay, well, standards are nice in the sense that they help us figure out what the lay of the land is. And for you as a teacher, if you're not an expert in the field, they tell you basically, right, what you could be teaching or should be teaching. They're outlining what's helpful for your students to understand about the world. Um, Cohn argues that standardizing these things is a bad idea. And again, Hirsch says that it's a necessary thing that we must do if we want our society to thrive. What I would like you to do is read these two articles, and if you go to the quiz section of D2L, and I'm going to open it up in a new tab just so I can go back to my other places. There should only be one quiz that you can look at. I'm going to just preview it, and it's really just two questions. The first is a series of 10 statements that Hirsch, the author who says we need a Common Core, would agree with, and some that he would not agree with. I'd like you to just check the ones that really represent his vision and leave the ones that don't represent his vision blank. Same thing for the Alfie Kohn article. Question 2 is about statements that he would agree or disagree with. Check the ones that he would agree with and leave the other ones blank. When you take this, you get a half point for each one that's right and negative half point for every one that is wrong. Because this is a true or false test, the guessing factor is really high, and if I trained a monkey to check boxes, on the average that monkey would get a 50%, even though I don't think that monkey could read. So in order for me to have any evidence that you really have read these carefully and understand them, you need to score pretty high and well above chance. Um, the good news about this is that if you get an 85% or better the first time, you get 100% for the quiz. If you don't get over an 85%, you can take it up to 10 more times and you'll get the highest score that you achieve. However, that highest score, if it's either 100%, 95, or 90, will all result in a 90%. If you don't get to a 90 at any point during subsequent trials, you just get the highest score that you got. I recommend looking at these statements while you are reading the actual articles and taking your time. I do want you to read them carefully because they bring up a lot of good points. We'll discuss this a little bit when we meet, but no more than 15 minutes because we have lots to cover. So that takes care of the two articles and the quizzes that go along with them. I want you to spend some time looking at these and applying them to the social studies material, identifying from each one of these sections, geography, history, political science, economics, and behavioral science. I'd like you to identify one relevant standard that would apply to this particular social studies material. I would also like you to figure out, if you were teaching this for a week, what would be the one major idea you would want your students to take away? And I want this major idea to be something that is broad and complex and will require building through lessons 1, 2, and 3. Now, we will get a lot more practice at this. I just want you to take an initial stab at it. Where we go from here then is the following week, I want you to read some more stuff about different types of goals and different types of thinking, from very simple thinking, recall, to very complicated thinking like evaluation or synthesis. And you will be the next week going through each one of those lessons and identifying what's the major point of lesson 1, what's the major point of lesson 2, and what's the major point of lesson 3. And all those major ideas should feed into your one overall major idea. And we'll talk more about that. When we meet, we'll have a lot of practice uh, going through curriculum and trying to identify and pull out what do we think is important about this. And you need to come up again with a very compelling reason for why this is important for yourself and for your students. Because if you don't think it's important, you can be pretty sure that your students won't. And some student will ask you, why do we got to learn this? And you should have a response other than because I said so, or because it's in the standards, or because, it's just important. You should have a detailed, passionate reason for why this stuff matters. So those are your tasks for this week. I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have via email. Uh, Probably the best way to contact me. I'm not always in my office and stuff like that. But good luck, and I will talk to you again next week.